Premanande. Hari Hari Bo. This morning we are reading from I'll Build You a Temple by His Holiness Giriraj Swami. Anybody knows? Where is it?
From the beginning or from middle or from which?
8-0, but from beginning. Anyway. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaham Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshta Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauramani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Some people were so averse that we had to be very tactful and induce them to engage in devotional service without their being aware that they were serving Krishna. Still, they would benefit. Prabhupada told a story of a young student who stubbornly refused to learn arithmetic. So instead of asking the boy what 4 plus 4 equaled, the teacher drew a picture of 2 cows and asked how many legs the 2 cows had. And through pictures and stories, she gradually taught the boy all the arithmetical processes. When a classmate of the boy told him, "Hey, the teacher is teaching you arithmetic," the boy replied, "Arithmetic? I hate arithmetic. No, I shall not learn." My task was somehow or other to engage people in Krishna's service and help them to advance in Krishna consciousness. Yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat. So this is one of the ways of trying to present Krishna consciousness to even those who are not wishing for Krishna consciousness, as the indirect method of creating some agyata sukriti in people's minds. Even though unwillingly they're absorbing therefore Krishna consciousness, they're still benefiting. As we know, the best of the methods are to go out for Sankirtan, to distribute books, so even people might not be willing to read the books, but just even by touching them or in any way somehow being exposed, seeing the books, they will get benefit. Or their even more effective way would be Harinam, where they directly hear the holy name, and they may even say, like it is mentioned here, that this boy, that story of which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj tells, that he hated arithmetics. And even though somebody might be hating God practically or having such kind of disposition, still they would benefit just by being somehow in touch with Krishna consciousness, or prasadam even for that sake. Of course, it is always more beneficial when people know what they're receiving. That's always more beneficial. But in cases when they are not favorable, then what is the other option? But somehow or other trick them, somehow or other induce them some way or another, without even them knowing that they are hearing, that they are tasting, that they are seeing something that is in relationship to Krishna. So it is not a very thankful task, because very often when devotees encounter personalities who have very extreme demoniac mentality, then it becomes very unpredictable situation. And therefore it is advised, and in such cases, such an extreme cases, then it is better not to present Krishna consciousness. Quite often I'm asked by certain boys that I met such and such person, and then I presented Krishna consciousness, but they became very upset and angry. And then what am I supposed to do? You know, because if we see that we are feeding milk to someone who is just generating more and more poison, then it's better not to do that. Then it's better to stop. Then it's better to somehow retract. And then if somebody is just becoming, we are trying to we might be thinking we are trying to help, to try to explain, but if we see that the reaction is negative, then it's better not to continue. So one just has to see what is the response of someone who is reacting to Krishna consciousness, in which way one is reacting to Krishna consciousness. But at least even indirectly like this, it happens so often. Like Harinam, the most common experience is in Harinam, when people just react, sometimes saying that, oh, I hate. I remember once in the West we had Harinam, and then some lady started screaming, stop it, it's like, there's really just really extreme cases that people just can't hear the holy name. So then still they hear the holy name. Like we know the story how the Prahlad Maharaj was born. No, Hiranyakashipu, he hated it. Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana. Parvat Muni and Narad Muni were taking forms as a bird and tripping where Hiranyakashipu was performing austerity. So even though they hated, still they received the benefit, so much benefit. This is Krishna's mercy. And then of course there are somewhat those who are neutral or ignorant. And then when they're induced in some way to Krishna consciousness, they gradually accumulate some agyata sukriti. They accumulate some benefit upon when amount to a certain degree, then they will become more inclined, more inquisitive, more prone to Krishna consciousness. So therefore this kind of tactful approach is required, because again, how many people come to Krishna consciousness just straight looking for the absolute? As Krishna is stating in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 4 types of people approach me. So then how many of them are looking for the absolute? Hardly any, which is the best type of approach, which is the best type of inquisitiveness, or the best type of way to approach Krishna. Of course, inquisitiveness is also one of those 4. But being sincere and really looking for God, hardly anyone. Like pretty much most of the even devotees, when they start practicing Krishna consciousness, they didn't start so really looking for Krishna. Like George Harrison would say in the Krishna book, in the introduction, that actually what we are all looking for is Krishna, but we just don't want Krishna because there is certain degree of envy within our hearts that we just don't want directly to know about Krishna or to hear about Krishna. So then somehow indirectly, in whichever way, and most likely that would be either because one is in distress for some reason or other, or that would be in search for some kind of wealth, having some desires, whatever there might be. But then still, by taking prasadam, by hearing the holy name, by somehow hearing also the philosophy, one will gradually be induced and inclined towards Krishna consciousness. So here Giriraj Maharaj is saying that in ISKCON, members and donors became part of a spiritual family and got the association of devotees, which was essential for their spiritual development. And this is essentially why Srila Prabhupada created ISKCON as a society. He said, why we are creating, why we are making all these different temples, so that everyone has the opportunity to associate. That is the main reason, because association, out of all the processes, devotional processes, even out of 5 main devotional processes, association is the most important. Because what will be there as an inspiration, as some kind of a model that will again inspire us to practice Krishna consciousness. So therefore, in association of the devotees, as it is stated also, lava matra, even a fraction of the association can be so beneficial that it can change one's life completely. So unfortunately, some life members took undue advantage of our generosity. And Prabhupada, ever vigilant, made a few adjustments to the rules. The following scheme should be followed henceforth. He wrote to me from Vrindavan in 1975. We have guest rooms and devotee rooms. The guest rooms can be used by anyone who pays the fees in advance. Any life member can live in a guest room for a period not exceeding 3 days free of charge. If he wants to stay with us longer for any reason, then he may move to the devotees' rooms, where he must live as we do, following all devotional practices as we do. Or he could pay the fees to stay longer in a guest room. So this is the system that we follow nowadays. It's not just that anyone who becomes a life member starts taking advantage and practically, we may say, misuse the facilities that devotees are offering. Because what is the process? What is the whole point of staying in the guest house? It is that one comes, and this used to be emphasized, and to some degree it's mentioned, but hardly anyone really follows. And then come for the Mangala Arati and the rest of the program, and then benefit in such a way. But mostly people have, of course, different agendas. They have different reasons, why they come and stay at certain places where ISKCON temples are. And therefore, it's not really for devotional benefit. It's not really for some devotional practice. So Srila Prabhupada, noticing this, then at that stage, he made the adjustment. I see. So only it is 3 days, and if anyone still wishes, which is definitely, it would prove very hard and very rare, anyone else, anyone staying a little longer and then moving and living with devotees and practicing and serving as the devotees do. Prabhupada also saw life membership as a way of engaging his disciples. As stating in the Padma Purana, he quoted in the Bhaktira Samrita Sindhu, the basic principle of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. Smartavya satatam Vishnur vismartavyo najatu chit sarva vidinisheda etayor eva kinkaraha. Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu. He should always be remembered and never forgotten at any time. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras should be the servants of these 2 principles. So yes, sometimes we can remember Krishna, but then the tendency is that we forget. Like just this morning, I was trying to be inspired by yesterday's Ishtagoshti, tried to be a little more attentive while chanting japa. And then I noticed how the mind drifts. How the mind drifts. So you can try to remember Krishna, but then again, we have the tendency to forget Krishna. And then again, trying to remember Krishna, trying to bring the mind back to the holy names. So, therefore, Krishna should also never be forgotten. So then how is that possible? Then only by certain engagement. Because Srila Prabhupada said, we cannot, why he's making all these different temples, why he's engaging devotees in so many different ways, because we can't just sit and chant. Can't just sit and chant 24 hours a day. So Srila Prabhupada, noticing the state of the devotees, created facilities so the devotees can be engaged in devotional service. when here in Mumbai, in the early days, and just when I think there was just the beginning of the Hare Krishna land. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj says that he had to undergo one certain operation. I think he had something like kidney stone or something, hernia or something like this. And then he was hospitalized for the operation. And then somehow or other, he had one dream. And it was an interesting dream, and he told that dream to Srila Prabhupada. And interestingly, Srila Prabhupada arrived also quickly to the hospital. He considered that actually operation is unnecessary and that it should be stopped, it shouldn't happen. So as the Srila Prabhupada came, but then operation already took place. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj narrated that dream to Srila Prabhupada. He said, Srila Prabhupada, I had a dream that you were called upon by all the previous acharyas to give a report of your preaching mission. And so Srila Prabhupada inquired, and so what it was? So Tamal Krishna Maharaj said that you gave a report that in this age, the people are extremely fallen. They have no qualifications. They're ignorant. They don't have knowledge. They have no taste to perform any tapasya. They really don't have absolutely any qualification for advancing in spiritual life. But then you said that they have one qualification, that something is still there. And what is that? That they're very dedicated to towards following your instructions. And that this is actually sufficient for them to advance in spiritual life. And then Srila Prabhupada replied, yes, that is correct. Yeah. People in this age are absolutely fallen, but yes, they're at least very dedicated towards following my instructions. So then, by those instructions, what did Srila Prabhupada give? He gave all these different types of engagements. He gave the constructions of the temples. He gave this life membership program. He gave the Sankirtan, introduced the Sankirtan Yagya, Harinam Yagya. So this is how devotees are engaged, because absolutely they don't have any qualification, or we don't have, or I don't have any qualification that we can sit down and just chant the holy names of Krishna. So therefore all these different engagements are there to give us somehow opportunity that we can remember Krishna. And then what better way there can be of remembering Krishna but associating with devotees, or being in association of the devotees. And therefore no other rules are as effective or as important as trying to remember Krishna all the times. And then again, how do we do that? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So Smaranam, how do we? So that therefore somehow or other making sure that whatever activities one performs, that there should be some katha, that there should be some hearing going on, speaking and hearing about Krishna. Because we know in the spiritual world, when we hear the pastimes in Vrindavan, that all the Brajabasis, whenever they perform any kind of activities, they sing songs about Krishna. They're always remembering, they're always chanting as well. It is not just performing certain activity, but they, like Mother Yashoda, she would compose different songs. They were singing different songs glorifying Krishna, remembering Krishna. So by this remembrance, actually, one can become, and one is then Krishna conscious. Prabhupada explained in his purport to the verse, quoted as C.C. Madhya, 22nd chapter, 113, one may sell books or enlist life members or render some other service, but these duties are not ordinary duties. These duties serve as an impetus for remembering Krishna. When one goes with a Sankirtan party or sells books, he naturally remembers that he is going to sell Krishna's books. In this way, he is remembering Krishna. When one goes to enlist a life member, he talks about Krishna and thereby remembers him. Smartavya satatam Vishnu vismartavya na jatuchit. The conclusion is that one must act in such a way that he will always remember Krishna. And one must refrain from doing things that make him forget Krishna. These two principles from the basic background of Krishna consciousness. This we, to some extent, had the experience, and devotees notice a big, drastic, negative impact on this movement was happening during 80s and then somewhat little bit into 90s, when devotees, instead of focusing on distributing Srila Prabhupada's books in America and in Europe, they were performing various other activities or selling activities, selling different kinds of other things that would kind of support financially the temples. And we saw that many devotees have been struggling in their Krishna consciousness because of that. Although one could say, yes, it is some financial support that it's taking place, but actually it was very drastically affecting the consciousness of the devotees. And very often they either left the movement or they just, continue practicing, but in to a very lesser degree. Yeah. I also remember I was introduced to selling the paintings, Hong Kong paintings, it's like, this is how initially we would collect for the tickets to come to India, go back and forth, settle for the visas, all these different kinds of fees. Or sometimes we would use agarbattis also, different ways of collection, to pay for all these different expenses. So it wasn't very pleasant. It was very, very purifying. And it definitely, except of the ultimate purpose of somehow then being able to serve Krishna, it didn't really have anything much to do with Krishna consciousness. And then one would sometimes even use different kinds of selling techniques and schemes, to inspire people to buy some of those. So it was very, very unpalatable. So it was a difficult way there was quite a period, at least for me personally, some period of years of struggle. I didn't have to, request the parents to sponsor the different Krishna conscious activities. By Krishna's arrangements and Krishna's mercy nowadays, that's not required. So, they somehow voluntarily are inspired to offer that support. But that kind of activities have been going on, and then directly also, remember there was one temple which had the financial difficulties, and then all devotees have been sent, to sell the paintings or do different kinds of things. There was no Sankirtan going on. It was a big drawback for the whole movement, because it wasn't directly engaged in Krishna consciousness. And even prasadam or any other kind of activity, if people also, they don't know that they're receiving it, then they will not receive that much benefit. They will not receive that much benefit. So then, what will foster, what will inspire their Krishna consciousness or anyone's Krishna consciousness? So for that reason, Srila Prabhupada was very keen and very strong upon introducing this kind of different services, but which were directly in Krishna consciousness. And one performing those would be also in one way forced to always think of Krishna. Thus, in conjunction with chanting 16 rounds and following the regulative principles, going to enlist life members and speaking about Krishna consciousness was a way of remembering Krishna. Understanding the importance of cultivating relationships with donors, when we enrolled life member number 1000 in Bombay, I decided to stop making new members and just concentrate on maintaining the ones we had. Though things did not work out exactly that way, I understood that the principle of care and cultivation was what was truly important, and always remember how Prabhupada welcomed and encouraged us, despite our coming from wretched conditions and being full of bad habits. He listened patiently to our trials and tribulations, sympathized with us and appreciated us, and tactfully engaged us in the 6 exchanges of love. So devotees did have various difficulties and carrying all kinds of baggage of previous bad habits and inability sometimes to adjust to different climate and customs and culture. But Srila Prabhupada, here at Swami here, is pointing out, was very, very patient and very sympathetic to all the difficulties that devotees were encountering. Of course, everybody practically involved in such kind of program of enlisting life membership had to go through certain purification. It wasn't so easy again to inspire someone to become a life member. So here, Giriraj Swami points out also that instead of continuing just making a new members, he said that he decided that when they enrolled 1,000 a member, then they should start focusing on cultivating those people, trying to make them Krishna conscious by giving them more opportunity to be engaged in devotional service, to give them more time, to give them more association. So this is also what Srila Prabhupada pointed out in the West, when so many devotees have started joining the movement. At some point he said, now you boil the milk. Now there are so many devotees. And very often also what it happens when there is a great number of the devotees, but then they're not really, that's not addressed, they're not taken care, or then also there is the tendency that devotees may feel neglected, that devotees may feel unnourished, the devotees can, feel disinspired. So then Srila Prabhupada said, now it's important to focus, to boil the milk, to engage those devotees in such a way that there is a lot of cultivating association. So similar thing with the life members, because it's not just some kind of business technique that one receives certain benefits in some ways, but it is rather more important that one induces Krishna consciousness. Because again, then we see, if one becomes Krishna consciousness, then it's not just a matter of giving some, what Krishna is pointing in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, just giving some fruit of one's work. That is there, but that is on the 3rd level of surrender to Krishna. Even better than that is direct engagement in the work of Krishna. But even far more better than that is surrendering one's mind and intelligence to Krishna. So if one would surrender one's mind and intelligence to Krishna, practically if one gives one whole life, then this is so much more better than if one just gives, some little fruits of his work, because then practically one not just works for Krishna, but gives everything to Krishna. This is what Krishna consciousness is. And of course, by that kind of engagement, one gains more taste for Krishna consciousness. One can give some fruit of the work, and his work becomes purified. He's not anymore responsible for certain reactions of that work. That's kind of fine, that it's more pious than really spiritual. It's leading one towards Krishna. But then still it's not sufficient unless one develops greater Krishna consciousness and higher taste for Krishna consciousness, because then by that, it's a whole different attitude that manifests. It's a whole different experience that manifests. And it's a whole different taste that manifests, leading towards more and more surrender, which we know it is the process of devotional life. More surrender, more faith, more taste, more surrender, more faith, more taste. This is how the whole process works. Ever increasing, ever blissful, experience. So therefore, that cultivation and that boiling of the, churning of the milk, this is what was, and is always required. Now I was in a position to help people in their spiritual lives, and they could contribute so much to the mission. I would remember my own fallen condition and try to please Srila Prabhupada by caring for our special friends in the same way as he would have cared for them. The same way he cared for us. I felt that I had to be ready to give myself to the members in the way Prabhupada has said. To make one devotee, we must spend gallons of blood. So it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of effort to try to purify all different kinds of conditioning. It's a lot of effort to try to resolve all different kinds of misconceptions that one might be having. It's a lot of effort to try to create the circumstance where one can become detached from the attachment to material life and material relationships and become attached to Krishna. It is very difficult. Of course, it's even more difficult when one has to deal with someone who already is very much engrossed and bound by certain circumstances, and especially even more so within the family life, which might not very often be conducive, supportive. So definitely there's a requirement of a lot of energy to try to inspire one to take to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada gave strict instructions that the membership contributions should be deposited 50% in his book fund, and 50% in his building fund, and not spent on maintenance. Thus there would always be funds to print and supply more books and to build temples. Once I met a very intelligent gentleman in his home in the Juhu scheme. He had been with Gandhi in the freedom movement. And when I mentioned Prabhupada's 50-50 policy, he said that it was brilliant, perfect. He mentioned some other party that had applied a similar 50-50 policy and gotten tremendous results. I felt gratified to hear that such a wise elder had appreciated Prabhupada's genius. So Prabhupada would display his genius in so many wonderful ways. Practically whatever he had done, it was perfect. It was just giving the fruits to an incredible extent. Sometimes at the end of towards the end of Srila Prabhupada's manifested pastimes, one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada that there were some controversies also going on and some difficulties, but the point was that there was discussion about certain arrangements and certain managerial policies. And then Srila Prabhupada said that actually, whatever has been done, I would never change any of those. I'm just paraphrasing. There was something he said like that. He said that actually, whatever has been done, I would have done it the same way again. Same way again. So therefore, whatever Srila Prabhupada did, it was just perfect. It was just the whole program of life membership, the whole process of engaging devotees, the whole preaching mission, the way how it has been said. It was just tremendously successful, just tremendously successful. So that was Prabhupada's genius. And then when we think about this Hare Krishna land, how Prabhupada, again, there's so much more genius displayed, how Srila Prabhupada was able to get the land, and then to get the land back when the devotees made a big blunder of canceling the contract, of just canceling the possession of this Hare Krishna land by being tricked by their own lawyers also, which were affected and corrupted by the Mr. N's lawyers. And then Srila Prabhupada devised again another genius method of inviting Mr. N, who had his Guruji, to Hyderabad, and that whole pastime of making him sign again the agreement. That was almost practically inconceivable. How could that happen? And And then even later there was another difficulty, another dispute, that there were so many other parties who have paid also for the same land, because that was Mr. Zen cheating business. So then Srila Prabhupada then discussed with one of those great businessmen, and then after discussion, when he came down from the room, he told to one of the devotees, he said, "Your guru, it's Paka businessman." Yeah. And he was so impressed with the way Srila Prabhupada was dealing, and of course, definitely doing everything for Krishna, that man gave up and he said, "Yes, then you take the land." I was so impressed with Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada was just practically such a genius that in every sphere of life, whatever he did, it was just perfection. So therefore, this also 50-50 policy. 50% for the book fund so that the Sankirtan Yagya can continue, and then 50% for building the temples, for preaching. One of the activities that Srila Prabhupada emphasized most for Juhu was the distribution of prasad. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explains, "Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati tadaham bhakti upahritam ashnami prayatatmanaha." If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit or water, I will accept it. According to Gita 13:13, if one eats food without first offering it to Krishna, one must suffer reactions. And if one eats food offered to Krishna, one is released from reactions. Yagya Shishtashina Santo Muchante Sarva Kilbishai Bunjate Tetvagam Papa Yepachanti Atma Karanat. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Soon after Prabhupada left Juhu, I wrote him, "Progress here has been encouraging. On Sunday, we began the prasada distribution program, and over 100 children and many poor adults partook. Daily our friends are bringing 10 to 20 small bags of rice, etc. And besides, Dravida Prabhu and others are collecting larger quantities from merchants. On the weekend, we go to the nearby apartments to collect the weekly Bhiksha alms." Prabhupada replied, "This prasadam distribution item is very, very important. And it is so much pleasing to me that in the beginning, so many children are coming for taking prasadam. And that supply of rice has come automatically. Please continue this program rigidly." Like we know, we can see, before now they demolished this school. As this school just across the road. And you see those kids, they would just come regularly, for halava, for khichdi, for whatever. Whenever it's there, they just keep on coming. How much they're benefiting. Every day they're just eating prasadam like this. Just very encouraging. So by prasadam distribution, you will do service to the Lord, and the public will be pleased upon you as well. So that's why you're distributing Krishna to everyone, and then there'll be also favorable response of the public. And we see how Giraj Maharaj is mentioning, they were responding, they were reciprocating, they were encouraged also. So they were send all the different items which could be used again for cooking prasadam. Gradually increase the number of guests and don't deny anyone. Continue in this way. Whatever is there, distribute equally. It may not be very sumptuous, but no one should be denied equal portion. Anyone is open to take our prasadam free. And in the next message, he again stressed the program's importance. This food distribution program is to be done very, very nicely. As I have already written in my last letter, generally people make a plea that why are there so many hungry and naked? So we invite all hungry and naked people to come to us, and we will give them food and clothing and Krishna consciousness as well. So this was Srila Prabhupada's program when he was also in one discussion with one reporter talking about so many different difficulties and problems that exist throughout the world. Srila Prabhupada said that we can practically feed the whole population on the planet. We have the program. So that was Prabhupada's program. He had a program. There wouldn't be any starvation. There wouldn't be anyone, anyone hungry, anyone needy. Srila Prabhupada had a program. And then upon being asked, then how would you do this? And Srila Prabhupada replied, he said, half of population we would engage in cooking, serving, collecting, and then half of population, would receive, all of that has been made as prasadam. Yeah? So that was a very simple program. Of course, unfortunately, not many people took interest in it, It's not, they're not very keen on receiving Krishna's prasadam. But Srila Prabhupada had a solution. Solution has been already given, like to make also the whole world practically Krishna conscious. This is what O.B.L. Kapoor, one Srila Prabhupada's good brother, he asked Srila Prabhupada in Allahabad that, you're a chemist, Abhay. At time Srila Prabhupada didn't take sannyas, I think. You're a chemist, so give some formula through which the whole world will become Krishna conscious. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, I know the formula. There is a formula. And then he quoted the verse, Trinadapi Sunichena. There is a formula. So, but it is also essential that people will take to that formula. Formula exists. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada has given everything, but somehow or other, again, to induce people to that it's still a challenging part. Of course, it's a purifying part. It's an engaging part on our part. That's why it is important. And as Giriraj Maharaj in the beginning also stressed, somehow or other, either directly or indirectly, we have to find the ways and means to somehow introduce people to Krishna consciousness, even though they might not be knowing about it. So, either again through life membership program, through prasadam distribution, Harinam Sankirtan, whichever way, somehow or other, create some kind of agyata sukriti, some kind of punya through which people will become more and more inclined towards Krishna consciousness. So the formula is here. It's a perfect formula for the 10,000 years to come. So this will attract the general public, and there will never be any shortage of foodstuffs. So continue regularly. In Bombay, there are many generous persons who like food distribution programs. And actually our temple should be via media for feeding the poor with food and spiritual knowledge. Our Bombay program should be based on giving Krishna consciousness through the English medium and distribution of prasadam without any discrimination. This will enhance our prestige and will accelerate our spiritual life as well. The temple program of Arti, Kirtan, Bhoga offerings, discourses, etc. should continue. There should be no neglect of that program. So it is very wonderfully going on, like especially for Makar Sakranti, our Nitai Padakamala Prabhu works very hard to distribute almost now 2 lakhs of plates practically at that point. So we see how it's increasing and reaching out to so many people. So far as your hired Brahmin cook, since we have our prasadam distribution program, this may be necessary, but he must be clean, no smoking, and he must wear kanti neck beads. Wearing kanti neck beads, then definitely she's following all the principles and no onion, garlic. And as far as possible, he must follow our principles. Yes, so that's what Srila Prabhupada said. He must follow. One who is engaged in cooking. One can be engaged. One can be engaged in cooking, but he has to follow. Once in Hyderabad, Srila Prabhupada was very upset because he noticed many different discrepancies happening. And I think that was on the farm. And then he called Mahamsa Swami that time. He was he called him that who is the cook? Who is the cook? And then they called upon the cook, and then Srila Prabhupada was very angry, very upset, because actually immediately he understood that through that so-called prasadam the devotees were taking, there was not much, there was no Krishna consciousness. And immediately could detect that actually the problem is in cooking, it's in cook himself. So immediately he said, remove the cook, remove that cook. Because the consciousness of the temple pretty much depends on the consciousness of a cook. So Srila Prabhupada was very upset at that time. But here, as far as the massive prasadam distribution, Srila Prabhupada pointed out that yes, some Brahmin cooks. So Brahmin means also, at least it should be Brahminical, it's not just anyone, just hired for cooking. Sometimes we have that, 2 rounds, 4 rounds, 6 rounds or something. It's like someone engaged in cooking. But so for devotees, one should be definitely more alert, concerned. But again, for general prasadam distribution, as long as somebody follows, and that's important, Srila Prabhupada said, as long as somebody follows our principles, then they can be engaged. They could be engaged in cooking prasadam. When Jagat Purusha came through Juhu on his way to Mayapur to help with the construction and saw the situation, he asked me why we hired cook. When I told him that we did not have devotees willing to do the service, he replied, if you like, I could stay for a month or 2 and learn how to cook in this situation. And once I do that, I could try to encourage some other devotees to come in to help. So this is how devotees themselves, they were so initiative and surrendered that they volunteered in so many cases to just perform devotional activities themselves. Like we know the whole program of making, or the process of making garlands for it, that was also earlier done by hired people, and then devotees got together and then started making garlands for the deities themselves. So like this, every service practically, if it's directly performed by the devotees, of course it will have greater potency and greater Krishna consciousness to it. Hare Krishna. So we will stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Gaur Premanande.